Welcome in everybody to today's episode, and today we're looking at some deep Dynasty stashes that you should potentially be adding to your team. It is January 5th. It's the day before week 18 starts. Most of us, the fantasy regular season is over. However, in Dynasty, we never stop. We are always grinding, and honestly, the offseason is where you win Dynasty. The players that you add, the moves that you make are how you take home the championship in Dynasty football. One little move can really change your season. So we're going to be looking at some players that you should potentially be adding to your rosters. I know a lot of people play in leagues where maybe they shut down waiver wires for the offseason, or they shut it down from after week 18 all the way through free agency, and then they turn waiver wires back on. If you play in a league like this, then this video is really, really important for you. If you don't, then obviously you have more time to play around with. You can pick up these guys anytime during the offseason, but I would try and do it sooner rather than later. It's time to let go of maybe some older players, older running backs, or third or fourth string receivers that just haven't done anything in a year or two. And potentially pick up these young guys that their value may increase due to the moves that are made in the offseason. Now, their value is not going to increase, obviously, because football's not being played. So it's not going to be anything that they necessarily do. It's going to be more of the moves that the teams make. And the perfect example for this is Jerome Ford from last year. Jerome Ford, I think, was Cleveland's RB4. Maybe he was the RB3. I think he was the RB4. I know he was injured sometime. I really liked his profile coming out of college. I think he was a fifth round pick or something like that. Anyways, he goes to Cleveland, and he was their fourth string running back all the way in 2022. Hardly played. I think he was more of their kick returner than anything else. And just by the nature of the moves that the Browns made in the offseason, they lost Kareem Hunt. They lost Dearness Johnson. They didn't draft any running backs. They didn't sign any running backs in free agency. Jerome Ford became the RB2, and his value skyrocketed, not by anything he did, but by the moves that the Cleveland Browns made. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get one step ahead of everyone. We don't want to fight everyone for Jerome Ford, after free agency, and he's a big ticket or something. And this year, Jerome Ford was RB15. He helped you this year. He wasn't amazing. He didn't win leagues, but he was just a solid RB2 most of the year. So, of course, it happened because of the Nick Chubb injury, but that's the whole point of this is the value that these players can get. So we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to start with the running back position. And the first guy I have on the list is Israel Abanikanda. You can see his 2022 stats from college there at Pitt. Monster year. I feel like this guy's probably rostered in a lot of leagues. Just because he kind of had a lot of hype around him. His rumored to run a 40 in the high 4.2s or the low 4.3s. He's on the Jets, a pretty hyped up team, and he is the RB2 right now for the Jets. So that's another reason why he might be picked up. Dalvin Cook's gone, and I feel like the Jets could roll into next season, not really making. They're obviously going to add a running back, but not making a big splash at running back. They're probably going to really try and beef up that offensive line. They don't have a whole lot of cap space, so Abanikanda could be the RB2 for the Jets next year. And pick him up now if he's on waivers, because if the draft is over and the Jets don't make any moves to bring in a running back, Abanikanda's value is going to skyrocket. So, yeah, he'll be playing behind Breece Hall. He'll still be, I think, okay, get some touches behind Breece Hall. But what if Breece Hall goes down? Then he's a smash play. So he averaged 4.5 yards a carry in the preseason. I know it's the preseason, but that's all we really have to go off of. He has 7 catches this year in kind of short playing time. So I'll be interested to see if they use him more in week 18. Maybe, don't risk getting Breece Hall hurt. They're not really playing for much. I know Breece Hall will play, but maybe they use Abanikanda a little bit more just to see what they got. And one last thing, he was 19th out of over 250 qualifying running backs for the best PFF run grade in 2022. His last year in college. So he's an interesting player. He's pretty explosive. I really liked him coming into it. Kind of wish he went to a better spot, but again, he could be one of those guys where we see his value really skyrocket. Next guy on the list is from Miami. Now, this guy may be a lot more rostered, or not rostered. He might be on a lot more waiver wires, is what I'm trying to say. It is Chris Brooks out of Miami, the Dolphins. In preseason, this guy had 22 carries for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, it's preseason, but for a lot of these guys, that's all we really have to go off of. He's a big back. He's 6'1", 235. He actually had some flashes this year as well. He had a game where he had 9 carries and 66 yards. It could be a crowded backfield in Miami. Obviously, Mostert and Wilson are still under contract. Both those guys you can get out of their contracts. I don't see why they would do that with Mostert. You're not really saving that much money if they get out of his contract. Maybe they do it with Jeff Wilson, get out of that contract and save some money there and just roll with Chris Brooks. Obviously, Achan's still there, so a crowded backfield. But Mostert is 32, 33 years old heading into next year. Achan is a great player. There's still some questions about what kind of workload he can have. He's been on the injury report a lot. Obviously, a smaller back. I think he can be, a 12 to 15 touch guy, but we just don't know yet. So Chris Brooks is an interesting player. I always find it intriguing, and there's going to be another guy on this list that we're going to talk about. When teams keep their RB4 on the same RB4 on their active roster basically the entire year, and they don't risk putting him on practice squad because that means they really like him and they don't want someone else to grab him. I know they can, I know most teams do carry 4 running backs, but in order to have the same RB4 all year long and never even move him to the practice squad, even when you could have used that spot and rolled with maybe 3 running backs, it's always intriguing to me. So it means they really liked Chris Brooks. You can see his 2022 stats at BYU there in his last year of college. So interesting guy. I think you should potentially pick him up. He could be a guy where, what if they move on from Mostert? I don't think they will. But what if he enters the preseason as the RB3, someone gets hurt, and now he's the RB2. Miami's always going to be using multiple running backs. They're never going to use just one running back. So interesting player there to consider. Next guy on the list is Dewayne McBride from Minnesota. He was basically on the practice squad. I think all year long he was on the practice squad. So, not as exciting as a guy like maybe Chris Brooks or something, but I liked Dewayne McBride coming out of college. I kind of wish, I think he had 7th round draft capital. I thought he was going to go higher than that. He had the 5th highest PFF grade in 2022 in college. You can see his stats there, pretty monster stats in terms of carrying the ball. And the thing is, he had the 12th highest elusive rating, so he broke per carry the 12th most broken tackles per carry or per touch, and 18th in breakaway percentage in college out of like 250 guys. So he can break tackles and he can make long runs. At least that's what he showed in his last year in college. And we just don't know with the Vikings in their backfield. Madison and Chandler are most likely back, but Madison didn't look that great this year. Chandler looked fine in the couple starts that he's had, but neither one of them have been like, oh my God. Cam Akers, I believe, is a free agent. Neither one of Madison or Chandler are like amazing. They didn't secure their job for sure. So if Dewayne McBride comes out, looks really good in preseason, or one of these guys get hurt, you could have a lot of value. And, they probably feel comfortable with their running back room. And this is another reason why I'm interested in McBride, is they probably feel comfortable with Madison and Chandler. If they had to go into 2024 with those two guys, they're probably okay with that. So I don't think they're going to put a big emphasis on bringing in a running back or drafting one high. So McBride could be the RB3 to start the preseason, and there's value in that for sure. We see it every year, guys. Like, look at the top 12 running backs this year. Guys like Mostert, Kyron Williams, even guys like Rashad White, Jerome Ford in the top 15, like Gus Edwards in the top 20. We didn't predict these guys. Brian Robinson as a top 24 guy. We didn't predict any of these guys to be top 20, top 15 players. And the running back position, if you get the opportunity, you can be, a top, an RB2 in this league. So moving right along, I believe we have 3 more running backs for you. Deneric Prince is the next one from the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, you see his 2022 stats there. This is another guy that was basically been on preseason, on practice squad all year long. I kind of hope in week 18 that, obviously they're going to be resting guys. I hope they give Deneric Prince a shot. He flashed in the preseason. He has a good 40-yard time in the low 4.4s. He's explosive. His broad jump was in the 85th percentile, which usually shows explosiveness. So I think he's an interesting player, mostly because Clyde Edwards-Helaire is almost assuredly gone. Jerick McKinnon is probably gone next year. I mean, maybe they bring him back, but he didn't really do much this year. He's getting up there in age. He'll be 32 to start the year. They could bring him back, but what if they don't? And Deneric Prince, who's been in the system now for an entire year, And the Chiefs are one of those teams where it feels like they really value guys who have been in their system. Usually rookies don't do well for the Chiefs. I know Rashee Rice is kind of an exception to that, but generally rookies take some time to kind of come on. There's obviously exceptions, but I think they're going to value a guy who's been in their system for a year who can plug him in and be the RB2 behind Pacheco. Whether that means he's the pass catching guy, I don't know. But he's a guy that I want to add because the Chiefs, again, they feel like a team that they're obviously going to be focusing on their wide receiver core or their pass catchers. They just feel like a team that's not really going to spend make it a high priority to bring in a running back. I could be wrong, but I don't think they're going to do that. So Deneric Prince, again, by the end of the draft, he could be the RB2 for this team. McKinnon can be on another team. Clyde could be on another team, and it could be a Jerome Ford situation where a guy who was kind of like the RB4, de facto RB4 on the team, did nothing all year, is now the RB2, is going to shoot up in value. So Deneric Prince is an interesting player that I like and I would be grabbing. Again, you can't grab all these guys, but if you can fit at least a couple of them, I'd take your chance on who you like the most. Next guy here, 2 more running backs for you, is Elijah Dotson from the Chargers. You see his 2022 stats there from, I believe it's Northern Colorado. He had the 4th most rushing yards in preseason. Again, it's preseason, but we don't have anything else to go off of. Almost 150 rushing yards in the preseason. Really good stats in college. He had 1,400 total yards. He had his last year in college, 47 catches. He had a 70 catch season. Excuse me, guys. And so that means he can catch the ball. So whether they use him as a pass catcher, I don't know, or as an all-around back, maybe the guy that gets 12 to 15 touches, but he can catch the ball, which is a big thing. He's another one of these guys, like we mentioned with Chris Brooks for the Dolphins. He's a guy that's been on their active roster all year long, meaning even though they had Eckler, Isaiah Spiller, and Joshua Kelly on the team, and that's why Elijah Dotson didn't really touch the ball, they kept him on the active roster. They never risked putting him on the practice squad, maybe because they felt like someone was going to scoop him up if they did that. So I think that's always intriguing to me when I see that, the same RB4 on the active roster. So they like him. He flashed in preseason. Eckler is probably gone from the Chargers, if I had to guess. Joshua Kelly is his 4 years is up. He was a third or fourth round pick. His 4 years for the Chargers are up. I don't really see them bringing him back. Isaiah Spiller is going into his 3rd year in 2024, and he hasn't really shown anything. Now, the only concern I have with Elijah Dotson is there's going to be a whole new coaching staff in there. Maybe Kellen Moore comes back. I don't know. That's up for debate. If they hire an offensive coach, then Kellen Moore probably doesn't come back. If they hire more of a defensive guy, then maybe Kellen Moore stays. It'd be better for Elijah Dotson if Kellen Moore stays, but because it's going to be the same system. But it could be a whole new system, a whole new coaching staff. They bring in the guys they like, so that could be bad for Elijah Dotson. But you never know. What if they like what they saw from or see from Elijah Dotson and they value him and he's their RB2 to head into the season? A lot of value as the RB2 for the Chargers. Okay, guys, we got one more running back here, and that's Eric Gray from the New York Giants. Another guy he's kind of just been like the special teams guy for the Giants, the punt returner, kick returner type of guy. I liked his profile coming out of college. He was he kind of projected to be a pass catching back. He had the 8th best receiving grade according to PFF for running backs in 2022. And there's just kind of an open backfield. It's a pretty simple one. It's just kind of an open backfield in the Giants for the New York Giants next year. So this is another team where I feel like they have a lot of holes to fill, offensive skill, receivers or tight ends. Obviously offensive line, maybe their defense. I don't know how much priority they're going to put into bringing in a running back. They didn't want to pay Saquon Barkley, which kind of shows their philosophy on running back. So they're not going to pay a free agent running back a whole bunch of money. They'll probably bring someone in or draft someone, but it's kind of an open backfield. Saquon, I think, is probably going to be gone. I mean, he could come back, but I would guess that he's gone. Matt Breida is not going to be there anymore. Gary Brightwell hasn't shown anything. So Eric Gray is another one of these guys. He could just see himself be, after the Giants draft, the RB2, projected RB2 or even RB1 on this team. So I like his build. I like that he can catch the ball. I like that they're using him as a kick/punt returner. It shows that he's good with the ball in his hands. They wouldn't do that if he wasn't good with the ball in his hands. So he's another guy that I really like. So a bunch of running backs there. I always like stashing running backs. I like to stash them over, wide receiver 4s or something, because generally fourth string wide receivers don't hit even when they get their opportunity. We've seen that over and over and over. It doesn't mean they're going to hit, but running back 3 or 4, if they get their opportunity due to injury, it's volume is king for running back. So that's it for the running back spots. We're going to get into some receivers here. We're going to start off with A.T. Perry from the New Orleans Saints. I liked him coming out of Wake Forest. He was a 5th round pick, I believe. He was a project receiver to me. Like, he had the skill set to me to be a solid wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 3 on a team. And he was just a project to me. And we kind of saw that this year. He didn't have an amazing year. He had a couple catches here and there. I think he had a big touchdown catch a few weeks ago. You see his 2022 stats there. He had the 17th best receiving grade according to PFF in 2022. He has good size. He's like 6'5". And this team could be without Rashid Shaheed, depending on, he's a free agent, so I don't know if they're going to bring him back. Maybe he gets paid. Michael Thomas is just old and always hurt. So the window's there. I mean, they could draft someone, of course, but again, we are projecting. We're trying to look ahead and find players who, they could easily bring in a receiver, but what if they don't? A.T. Perry is now the number 2 receiver for the Saints, and there's value. Every wide receiver 2 and probably wide receiver 3 should be rostered. So A.T. Perry is a guy that I'm interested in just because there's not a super crowded wide receiver core for the Saints as of now. Moving right along, I have 2 Bengals guys here. Charlie Jones is the first one. And both these Bengals guys, it's kind of the same story, but they're going to fit different roles. Charlie Jones, he's like their punt returner kind of guy right now. He had the 14th best PFF receiving grade in 2022. I think he's the Tyler Boyd replacement, if I had to guess. Tyler Boyd's a free agent. And I think Charlie Jones kind of steps in. He's had a year to learn the system. He kind of steps in as that slot receiver. It comes in on third with 3 wide receiver sets. And I think he's just the Tyler Boyd replacement. So is there amazing value in that? No. Is there some value in that? Yeah. I feel like Tyler Boyd, especially if one of the main 2 receivers are hurt, Tyler Boyd's like a low-end flex. So Charlie Jones is interesting. He was top 30 in yards per route run in his last year in college, which is always a good metric. So he's a guy that I'm interested in. And same with this next guy for similar reasons. Andrei Iosivas, I believe I said that right, out of Princeton. Dude's an explosive athlete. He has the size and speed that not a lot of players have. He was drafted as a project receiver as well. He made a couple good catches this year. To me, he was obviously he was going to be a project receiver. This team knew that. And even though they had Chase, Higgins, and Boyd, they were kind of projecting, what if we don't bring back Higgins? What if we don't bring back Boyd? Even Trenton Irwin, who is kind of their third, he's the guy that replaces. If Higgins or Chase are out, Trenton Irwin is that second receiver to play on the outside, right? Boyd's the third slot guy. It's Chase and Higgins. If one of those guys are out, it's Trenton Irwin. Well, Trenton Irwin's a free agent as well. I think they could bring him back because they can bring him back for cheap, and they want to bring back someone who's comfortable with the system. But what if they don't? What if they lose Irwin and Higgins? Iosivas could be the wide receiver 2 lining up outside of Chase. The Bengals strike me as a team. One, they don't spend a whole lot of money now. They do have the money to spend. Do they franchise tag Higgins? I don't think they can pay what Higgins is going to get. He's going to get a lot of money. I don't think they can pay him, Chase, and Burrow. They obviously have to pay Chase like this year. So it's going to be interesting to see. I feel like they're a team who's going to be like, look, we have Joe Burrow. We have Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is the clear-cut alpha on this team. Yeah, T. Higgins is a great receiver. We'd love to have him. However, I think our money is better spent on rebuilding the offensive line, building up the defense. We can survive with Burrow and Chase connection and then some nice complementary players around him. Some guys that know the system well, a good tight end, a good pass-catching running back, a solid, wide receiver 2 and 3. I feel like they're a team that could go in this direction. And so Iosivas, could be the wide receiver too. And I just like his profile as an athlete. So if it translates over to the playing field and to on the field during a game, then Iosivas could be a really valuable player heading into the offseason into 2024. I believe we have 2 more receivers for you. This is a guy that I think is probably rostered on most teams, but just in case he's not, Trey Palmer. He's one of the few receivers. He's like basically the only player on this list that actually did something this year of substance. You can see I put 2022. That's his 2023 stats. 37 catches, 375 yards, 3 touchdowns. If you don't know about Trey Palmer and just his story and his background, he went to LSU as a really high recruit. And it just, things didn't pan out at LSU, and then went to Nebraska, and he was just like fed at Nebraska. He was just their offense in Nebraska. Like, they didn't throw the ball a whole lot because it's Nebraska, but he was just like, when they did, it was Trey Palmer. He had 71 catches for 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. Looks like the Nebraska offense threw for about 2,700 yards. So he was over a third of their receiving yards, and they threw 17 touchdowns, and he had 9. So he was well over 45% of their production total combined, 45%. So, he's a smaller guy. He's really fast. He has 4.33 speed. We've seen it on a couple plays this year, some explosive plays. He had the 15th best receiving grade in college in 2022. And again, flashed as a deep threat. So this team, the Bucs, they're interesting to see what they do in the offseason. Do they bring back Baker? Do they kind of go for a rebuild? I think a lot of it depends on how this Week 18 game plays out. If they lose to the Panthers and don't win the division, then I think I can see them doing a full rebuild and maybe not even bringing Baker back. If they win, they make the playoffs, and who knows, even win a game, anything can happen. I guess they would be playing the Cowboys, right? That probably wouldn't happen, but you never know. Anyways, if they do a full rebuild, Mike Evans could be gone. I believe he's a free agent. Chris Godwin has an out on his contract. Trey Palmer, if one of those guys leave, could be the wide receiver 2 next in line. If both of them leave, like, he's for surely probably going to be a top 2 receiver. I see some value here in Trey Palmer. I think if he's not picked up, he definitely needs to be. I also think he's just a good player. So last receiver on this list is Justin Shorter. And he's not short, by the way. He's like 6'5". He missed this year due to being IR. He was drafted in the 5th round by the Bills. I think Shorter is the Gabe Davis replacement. Again, the Bills are going to be interesting to see what they do this year. I feel like Stephon Diggs, who was terrible the last 6-7 weeks of the season, there's been some drama around him at times over the last couple years. I think Stephon Diggs wants out. I think the Bills probably want to get out of Stephon Diggs' contract. He is getting older. I still think he's a good player. The problem is I don't know how they're going to get out of it because they're out. Their contract out is not until 2025. And so are they going to be able to trade him? They can't cut him. That's going to be a whole lot of dead cap. So anyways, Gabe Davis is a free agent. I think Gabe Davis is gone. That experiment, it was fine for what he is. It didn't work out. I think if anyone's going to replace Justin Shorter, it's going to be Gabe Davis. And think about if the team also loses Stephon Diggs. They're going to focus on bringing in a receiver to replace Diggs. And then they're probably going to look to what they already have to replace Gabe Davis. I don't know if they're going to be able to spend all this money and draft capital on multiple receivers. And I don't know if you want to go into 2024 with 2 rookie receivers and just 2 starting receivers. Unless they pan out, of course. Anyways, Justin Shorter, yeah, he's been hurt all year. He's still been there learning the system, all of that stuff. So there's value in that. He's the deep threat for Florida. He played for Florida and Anthony Richardson. You can see his 2022 stats there, 29 catches for 577 yards. That's a lot of yards for just 27 catches. I'm going to do some 29 catches. That's almost 20 yards per catch, per reception. So he's a deep threat guy. He's that big bodied guy. He's not like blazing fast, but he has good speed for his size. And so I think that's kind of what Gabe Davis is. He's not blazing fast, but he's big. He's like 6'3", and he has good speed for his size. to me, it's just like a replica of Gabe Davis. So I think Shakir, who's already there, is kind of their wide receiver 3, their slot guy. I think Shorter could potentially be the Gabe Davis replacement. We'll see about the Stephon Diggs stuff. Definitely needs to be added, and I bet you he's out there on everyone's waiver wire because the guy's been on IR all year. Last guy I have for you guys is a tight end. Tight ends are hard because, so few of them are even making a difference. So all tight end 1s are probably on rosters. And there's not many tight end 2s that warrant being on a roster. I put Julian Hill here for the Miami Dolphins. He was an undrafted free agent out of Campbell. He made the active roster. He was the first Campbell player, I believe, to make the active roster. But Julian Hill is very, very interesting to me. He's an athletic tight end. He's been on the Dolphins roster all year long. He is a receiving tight end in college. You can see 38 catches for 670 yards and 5 touchdowns is really good for a tight end in college, especially at Campbell. And the Dolphins, they come from that San Francisco. Mike McDaniel comes from that San Francisco tree. Their offensive system is very, very complicated for tight ends. The tight ends are super, super important. They need to be able to be versatile, line up in the backfield, in the run game, blocking, all this stuff. Julian Hill's a pretty good blocker as well, which is why he's probably on the roster. And he's shown the receiving skills. But I didn't expect him to come in. One, it's tough for rookie tight ends to come in anyways, right, and make a difference. 2, it's really tough in a system like the Dolphins or the San Francisco where it's why Mike Gesicki didn't do well. I think everyone thought, holy crap, Mike Gesicki's going to be really good because Mike McDaniel, he comes from the San Francisco system, an offensive guy. Mike Gesicki just wasn't the type of tight end that fit their system, and that's why Durham Smythe is so valuable to them because he knows the system very well, but he's not a great receiving guy. If Julian Hill spent this year learning the system, he could be the next tight end in line there, and he could just be super, super valuable for that team. I don't think they're not using a tight end this year because they don't want to use tight ends. I think it's just, again, Durham Smythe is a great receiving tight end. So if Julian Hill gets the hang of the system, shows that he can play in this system, and is their receiving back, you could be looking at potentially the third option, which they don't really have in Miami, a good third option for the Dolphins. And I think that's super, super valuable. So that's it, guys. That's all I have for you today. Again, take a shot on some of these players. Move on from some of the older running backs that you were just holding on to because they were handcuffs. I made one of these videos after rookie drafts last year around June-ish. And a couple of the guys on our list was Puka Nacua, pick him up. Keaton Mitchell, pick him up. Both those guys, obviously Puka was amazing. Keaton Mitchell was potentially, we'll see next year what he does. I know he's coming off an injury, but he had some flashes there and was looking good. So if you hit on one of these guys, it's just going to increase, even if they're just RB2s or even good for just a good stretch. In terms of quarterbacks, I didn't have any quarterbacks on this list because every QB2 in a Superflex league probably should be rostered. We learned that this year, and I think a lot of QB2s are rostered because of this year, so many injuries. And a lot of QB3s. If there's any situations where the QB2 is still not for sure, we don't know who the QB2 is. One of the situations I think of is the Dolphins, and they have Mike White and Skylar Thompson there. Skylar Thompson could be the QB2 heading into 2024 for the Dolphins. It'll be his third year in the system. I'd pick him up at least this offseason just to see what happens. Could be value there. So that's all I have for you guys. As always, like and subscribe. We're going to be putting out a lot of Dynasty content for you, and appreciate it, guys. And we'll catch you guys next.